Welcome to Philosophy of Education. This is our first PowerPoint that we'll be going through. I'm screencasting it, and hopefully this works out well. I've never done this before on an online course, screencast all these pieces of things, but we're going to try to make it quick in under 15 minutes. So let's see what we can do. So we're going to do a quick welcome introduction to myself, what this class is, what it's not, what the purpose of education is. We're not going to do a partner activity. We're going to do a syllabus review and discussion we did in the front video on there, so you can take a look at that. We'll do a Canvas walkthrough a little bit, but I think more importantly, we're actually going to get to some of the pieces of things. We're going to do philosophy of literature, and then we're going to do traditional versus online. The first thing I'd like to do is a mission statement review. And so what I want you to do is pause right now and look at this statement, see what you can think about the company. Life is good. It's a company, and really get into, in your mind, thinking about what it is. So take 30 seconds, just go grab a piece of paper or open up a window and say, okay, what does this tell me about the company? And I'm going to let you pause now. And so when we're starting to look at the mission statement, it really goes down to a few things. One is, what is the purpose of the company? What are they going for? What is the dream? What are they trying to build? And what is that thing that will never end? And for Life is Good, which you can probably see at airports, they make like t-shirts and frisbees and hacky sacks and stuff. They want to spread the power of optimism with, stick figures smiling. That's kind of what their business model is making stuff that does that. Now, could they make a t-shirt that probably could sell just as well with somebody frowning or something like that? Yes. But they make good money selling t-shirts of people hiking while smiling. And so that's their piece of things. And so for them, that's what they push themselves to do. And what we're going to start looking is at what's going to push you to do something in education. What's your goal? How do you look at the world in a way that's really going to push you to get to that spot? And what is that spot? What does it look like? Are you hoping to change the world to make really productive CEOs? Or are you hoping to make them all find inner peace? Or is it to become the greater glory of God? What is that thing that makes you go to class every day? And what are you trying to drive those students to become? So, our goals for today is to understand the structure of the class and understand the importance of having and identifying your own personal philosophy and comparing it to the philosophies of others. Um, so instead of doing a 3x5 card, you can do this on just a piece of paper or whatever. What I want to know is why you want to teach or why you want to lead, because I know we have nurses here and you're also teaching at the same time as well, or principals or school counselors. Why is it that you want to do the thing that you want to do? So please pause, fill it out. We're hoping going to get to under 140 characters. So 140, including, basically under 140 letters. So pause, fill that out. All right. So what did you write down? Why do you want to teach and why do you want to lead? What is it that's driving you and what do you hope to accomplish? This is going to be important because this is the first step. And hopefully by the time you finish with the course, you look back and say, maybe I either flushed that idea out or maybe I changed it. Maybe that was something that was um, kind of just a silly thought in my head at the first time, but now that I've really fleshed out something different. So what is this class? This class is designed to focus on theory. We're not going to be getting to the practical application of teaching, if that makes sense. We're not going to be talking about direct instruction strategies or um, how do we do a constructivist lesson and what are the components of a good lesson plan, or how do we integrate technology into a classroom? No, we're not going to do any of that. What we're actually going to be focusing on, this is important, is we're actually going to be focusing on why are we doing the things we're doing and what is the theory behind that. So methodologies, practices, etc. It's not going to be in this class. It's going to help you gain a deeper understanding of what you believe about running a school, classroom, or teaching a lesson, but not how to run a school, classroom, or teach better. We always look at this class as something that you start with. It's your foundation. What are you doing this for? Dig into the history of education of it, helps you put names to theories and past practices, which helps you have more intelligent discussions with people in your business. I think that when we go in here and we start talking, it's so important to think about the vocabulary we're using and why we're using it. It's really important to really understand those functional pieces of things. Talk intelligently about the educational philosophy and identify personal philosophies in conjunction with the class. So how do you align yourself with previously thought of philosophies? So think about gaining control of a classroom, running an effective staff meeting, grouping students, evaluating a teacher, teaching students how to read, disciplining a student, or assigning homework. Why are you doing any of those? What is the reasoning behind those things? Is it to get kids to know information? Is it to get kids to become better thinkers? Is it to get kids to, is it to get patients to become healthier? Is it get patients to take ownership of their own lifestyles? what are we doing and why are we doing it is so important. How can we effectively interact with those without thinking, or sorry, how can we effectively interact with these without knowing what we believe? If you really want people to think of the world in this positive, uplifting way, how we do discipline in a classroom makes a huge difference. So we're going to talk about why, the whys, and not the hows. But we are going to notice that the why should influence the how. Your reason for how should come from the why. So, what is the purpose of education? Why do we educate? Should we educate? Do we have a responsibility to educate our youth? Whose responsibility is it to educate? Government, parents, society? When we're starting to look at these big questions, it comes down to why. What is the purpose? Is it religious education? And it's to get their souls to heaven. And that's not our government's responsibility in America. But in some countries, it is the government's responsibility to have their religion be front and forward and center. And does where we live differentiate the purpose of education? Should we educate? Do we have the responsibility to educate our youth? And whose responsibility is that? And that all comes down to why do we do what we do? Again, this is a great pause point. Please take a couple minutes, ask out those questions, really think back to what you're doing. I'm going to give just a quick 5-second pause to pause it and then come back. Perfect. And so when we start to look at education, we start to look at two pieces. One is about the self-improvement and humanity, and the other is the economic, the social, societal improvement. If you balance those two things, I think we start to look at the kind of the two driving forces. Are we educating to help improve our society, really drive that economy, really move things forward? Are we educating to, for people to gain enlightenment and come to be their best selves? Or do we fall somewhere in the middle of those two things? And I think that's where most of us fall. I don't think either of us think that, any of us think that even training for pure humanity and self-improvement doesn't have benefits to society, or even improving kids for societal benefit doesn't have impact on who the person is. So think time. Take 3 minutes to really focus on something you've learned in or out of school, something you really learned. What did you learn? How did you feel? And how did you learn what you learned? So I'm going to pause right here for another 5 seconds. Please take 3 minutes and really do that. All right, we're back. So what I really wanted you to get at that wasn't it an experiential piece of things? Was it something that was very life-giving to you and makes you a better person? Or was it something that made you really fundamentally a better contributor to society? How do you value that? What are those value pieces of things of that? And is that something that you think about when you go out and start teaching? Where a lot of times when we start teaching classes and courses, we start thinking more about the subject matter and not what to do with the subject matter sometimes. And so sometimes it's just important to think back and think about how we learn stuff and what's going on there. We went over the syllabus, and now we're going to get into chapter 1, and hopefully we do a really quick piece of chapter 1. So why do we educate? What the purpose? Educators have a more concern with motion than with progress. This is an interesting statement by Knight, because when in this course, we're starting to really start looking at what is the difference between motion and progress. Progress being moving towards a goal, and motion just be kind of going in circles. Everyone says that education, what's out now is going to come back in 20 years. And is it just going back and forth and helping make those textbook producers a little extra cash? So start thinking about what is the purpose of education. So studying at philosophy of education is to help us become better acquainted with the basic problems of education, to enable educators to evaluate suggestions offered to different solutions into the problem, to help educators clarify the thinking of the goals of life education, and to guide educators in developing an internally consistent point of view that relates to the larger world. Now, with this, we have three kind of big aspects of it. The activities of philosophy that bring, that attitudes of philosophies that conjures, and the content of philosophy. So our activities are examining, analyzing, synthesizing, speculating, prescribing, evaluating. A lot of this goes down to the Erickson stuff to this, or we're going to get into different philosophies and how they really look at things. But really coming down to what does a philosopher do? And when we start thinking about that, we really come down to this idea that a philosopher actually just really thinks through things really well. And they do that by following all of these steps: examining, analyzing, synthesizing, speculating, prescribing, and evaluating. Our attitudes, being self-aware, being honest with yourself and who you are, comprehensive, collecting as much information as possible, penetration, desire to dive deep as possible, and flexibility, willingness to suspend belief on old problems and consider new ideas and alternative viewpoints. And so when we start to do those things, we start to be a philosopher when we have those attitudes. Finally, our content. We have three big areas. One is metaphysics. What is real and what is not real? Are our senses tricking us? Is there a God? And if so, what role does God play in us? If everything's predetermined, can we make a bad choice? Epistemology, and that's what is true and what can be known. How do we know something is true if it changes? For a long time, we thought the world was flat until it wasn't. Um, we we really think that we really can see something, and then maybe a something happens where a ball knocks us in the head, or we've people come back from a bar and their perception changes on what can be true and what's not true. And then finally, axiology: what's moral, what's ethical, and what's beautiful, and who decides that? And they're all connected, because if we think that there's a God and the God produces truth and the God tells us what's moral, that's very different than there's no God. And therefore, what's true is what we can sense, and therefore what is moral and beautiful and ethical is what comes out of those choices that is best for all. And when we start looking at that as a concept, it really helps us to move forward. So, what I would like you to do is take 5 minutes, and this is something we do in class during the regular piece, but I want you to start really thinking, pick one of these, and really kind of deep dive real quick. Do a quick Google, take 5 minutes to kind of understand a little bit more and write a summary of metaphysics or epistemology or axiology. And we'll get to those pieces later, and we'll hit those back up again. But I just want you to take 5 minutes to do that. So, I'm going to give you another 5-second break here. Perfect. Hopefully you paused, came back, got a little bit more in-depth understanding. Stanford has an amazing website if you're having trouble finding, kind of a true source for these things. So, leading, educating, and training. And the relationship that we're going to be selecting here. So, let me do something real quick. Perfect. Um, this is our last slide for this chapter 1. And so training is something that's replicable. And so when we're training, we're thinking like a dog, or like in the military, where we want everyone to do the same thing at all times. We want them to do that. Education is when a person is helping you get to a spot, a desired outcome to those things. And then learning is just kind of what you do naturally, just life experiences help you learn. That has no direct goal, but we do all of those through schooling. And depending on what we're looking for, it could be a lot of our nurses go more to that training side of things, because you want those person to be able to take the medication the right way. Or in education, we want them to find something, but more in a constructive as approach. And then learning, what we're hoping for is just to, those experiences. Why do we go on field trips to a museum? Because that's learning, because that's where we're developing. We're putting those things in. For your weekly attendance, I need you to reflect on these 4 questions and then write about them and then turn them in. Here's your chapter 1 case study. I'm gonna let you read it, but you're also gonna have to turn in these questions again around the case study. Finally, the follow-up questions. We're gonna write down something you still have questions about, what's beneficial for you during today's sessions, and then other comments you may have. And that's what's gonna be due for the weekly participation piece of things. If you have any more questions, feel free to give me an email or put them in the class discussion board. And that's up in the top module where you can actually find out more about me and all those types of things. So I prefer things in the discussion board, so that way everyone can benefit from it. And again, I'm so excited to start out this journey with you. And I will be posting a few more resources as the week goes on as well, for people who want to dive in a bit more.